Hello, everyone. It is your girl, Marcie Thomas, here with you for another episode of Live Well Sister. So please come on in the room and get ready for what's going to be a dynamic conversation with an outstanding young sister who is out here doing big things in the world. And I just really can't wait to dive into her story so that you can learn how she has learned to live well and have the life of her dreams. So this show is pre-recorded, so you can still watch and drop comments and all that, but do know that it's pre-recorded, so we won't be able to answer your questions live. But with that being said, I don't want to have any delays in getting started. Our special guest is the author of Undiplomatic, How My Attitude Created the Best Kind of Trouble, and that is Deesha Dyer, who is the former White House Social Secretary. Now, she is also an award-winning strategist, an on-the-ground community organizer, and executive operations expert. She did serve as the Social Secretary during the Obama administration and is currently the founder and CEO of social impact agency Hook and Fasten. She has done so many wonderful things that we could talk about, but I know you actually want to hear from her. But just another couple of quick things. She is also the co-founder of BGirl.World Global Scholars, which tackles the racial disparity in study abroad. And she's been named with so many different awards, most recently receiving a Women of Excellence Award by the city of Washington, D.C. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and bring Deesha Dyer to the stage. Welcome, Deesha.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it is indeed a pleasure. I've been waiting for a while. I've known about the book for a while, known about you for a great while. So it is indeed an honor to have you take time of your busy schedule to be here with us and share a bit of your story. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Of course.
So Undiplomatic is your book, but your story extends so much more beyond that. But with that being the case, how does it feel to have like a bit of your life out there in the world with this book for just about a year now, right?
Yeah, it'll be a year. It's actually going to be a year in a couple of weeks, April 24th.
Wow. Okay.
And again, thank you so much for having me and providing this platform for all of us, really. But, I've never been a person to shy away from telling things about my life. I've always been very honest in things I've gone through or just poetry I've written about, just different things. And so that's just my medium to connect with people. I think vulnerability is a good way to do that. So my story, being out there now, and it's really a memoir, which is just a section of my life, not the whole life. Of course I was nervous because I think everybody gets nervous like that of how it's going to be received, or is there somebody you talked about wrongly in the book? And so I was very careful that I didn't do those things. But it feels good because the reaction to the book has been very much people opening up about whether, imposter syndrome, changing careers, not feeling qualified, or laughing, or the mystique of, Washington. Even my colleagues are like, it's fun to look back on what we worked on and things like that. And so it feels good, but definitely was a bit of nervousness to begin with.
Yeah, I can only imagine because you
Mhm.
really do tell your story, and
Mhm.
we learn a lot about you. We learn a lot about your time working in the White House, and just that whole journey. But
Yeah.
for me, I'll admit I got a few years on you, Deesha, but I
Mhm.
was so inspired by your story
Oh,
because
thank
one of the
you.
things that really stands out to me is the fact that you are someone who took a path that wasn't necessarily the one that you normally would have initially thought it would have been, and you kind of a lot of detours here there, and but you still wound up being exactly where you needed to be. And for that,
Mhm.
I find your story so powerful because
Thank
how
you.
many people have to do that, number
Mhm.
one, but sometimes they don't do it with the level of finesse and courage and the ways that you do it that are so powerfully told in the book.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think it wasn't a formula of me knowing how to do it. I think it was very much like I feel comfortable sharing some of these things, and I want to really, work on this strong black woman narrative and this narrative that we have to save people or that we have to, you know, be super successful in order to be happy or to be confident. And so that's why I kind of told the truth in the book of just like, yeah, I had all these amazing positions, but I still felt an emptiness or a confidence issue inside, and I wanted to name that solely so people didn't feel alone if they felt the same thing.
Right, absolutely. And you've already mentioned it, but imposter syndrome, you definitely talk about it. It's like a thread throughout the book, and some of the other works you've done outside of the book also tap into that. So many of us have heard that, but some people don't really know what that means. So, how do you define what imposter syndrome actually
Hmm.
is?
Yeah, imposter syndrome is a feeling that you are not qualified to do the thing you're already doing, that you are not worthy to do it, that people will find out that you're faking it. And so, again, like feeling like an imposter, like you don't belong there. And so that's what it is. And I think that it's different from just being nervous about something or, feeling, scared about something. This is a deep seated belief that, underneath everything, you're not qualified, or you're not worthy, or you don't deserve it. And this often shows up when we are already in positions of
Right.
authority, or we already have accomplished something, and we doubt how we got there. So that's what imposter syndrome is.
Yes, and I've heard your former boss, Michelle
Mm-hmm.
Obama, talk about imposter syndrome
Mm-hmm.
as well. Do you feel, or have you found that it's something that impacts women or women of color, Black women, more maybe than others?
Well, yes, I think that it impacts. I mean, the original purpose behind it was really to discuss women in the workplace, period. And so that's where it came from. But when you belong to when you have various identities, they kind of work in tandem with imposter syndrome. So not only do you have, this regular doubt that you're going through, and on top of that, then you belong to, a group like LGBTQ
Right.
or Black women or immigrants or veterans. And part of it is because, that we feel that way is because there's the oppression that happens against us. And so we have all these factors helping us feel like we don't belong, or policies in place that basically say we're not valued. So when that is in conjunction with this deep-seated belief that you have about yourself, it's a disaster. And so, I'm not saying that people who don't belong to those groups, like, white men or whoever, don't go through imposter syndrome. I'm not saying that. But what I say is that there are forces that happen in this world through microaggressions, through bias, through just regular aggressions that
Mhm.
we know play a part in making us feel insecure because it was never designed for us to feel confident or to succeed. And so,
Right.
those things are always going to be at play.
Yes, and as you're saying that, I'm just thinking about, I mean, even some of the things we're going through now. Of course, your book took place before what we're dealing with right
Yeah.
now,
Hmm.
but thinking
Hmm.
about the whole thing of people talking about DEI hires and things like that. So it's
Hmm.
like those people on the outside are saying we're not really qualified, even though we're usually much more qualified. But
Hmm.
then sometimes, even though we may have degrees or not, or just the life experience or whatever that allows us to be in these positions,
Hmm.
but we're dealing with it from within. But then you got people telling you that you're not qualified from without.
Hmm.
So yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. that can be a mess.
Yeah, and to be honest, we're overqualified. And
Right.
so we are overqualified because we are so used to having to have multiple degrees, multiple
Mhm.
certifications, go to multiple networking things because we've always known that we've had to work harder than other people. And so we come to the table most of the time overqualified, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But we then end up feeling like we're not qualified. But the interesting thing is that the people that are saying all of this, the opposition, the Republicans or whoever, they truly don't matter. We don't care about those people, but they
Mhm.
hold a key to policy. So that is the thing. I could care less what anybody says about me. Feel free to say whatever you like. But then when you do things to affect me or my community, our
Mhm.
wallets, our food, our housing, all
That
of
part.
those things, that's when it starts to come into play. And I know that it's not my fault, or I know that I'm not at fault, or I'm not whatever for the housing crisis or for food banks or for people getting fired, but they're master manipulators,
Mhm.
and so they're going to play into that, like, well, you should do something about it. Well, you should join the Republican side. Well, you should do this. And then that starts to make you feel as if, like, maybe they're right. And thankfully I'm mature enough and have my healing long enough to know that I can, like, look at that map. But there's a lot of young people or people that have always been in corporate that maybe don't have that same privilege or that same space to say, kind of like F you at the end of the day.
Right.
And
That part.
so now we're living, under this, like, how can we fix a problem that we never created?
Yeah, we definitely did not create
We
the
did
problem
not.
that we have. Not at all. And it's ironic that today, sidebar, I had something pop up on my alerts from something that I wrote years ago, about 6 years ago.
Mm,
And I was working in a corporate America job. And on that day, I wrote something to the effect that, "Ooh, I can't do this anymore. It's too much. I don't
mhm.
like feeling, beholden to what other people think or what they
Yeah.
feel, or the politics or the games that they play, because I
Mhm,
know who I am and I know what I have within, and
mhm.
there's so much more." So, ironically, that popped up today as we're getting into this conversation.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I mean, and the thing about it is we can't. There's an economic part to this. That, like, if we all could up and quit our jobs, then that'd be great. If we
Right.
all could say, I'm moving somewhere else, like out of the country, that will maybe value my personhood more, then great. But it's not as easy because of the systems that have a hold on us, because of capitalism or whatever else. And so it's a constant puzzle piece and catching up and shifting that we must do as people, which is why community is so important. Because if I'm going to be here, if I have to be here in this country, I'm going to make sure that I'm surrounded by a community of people that see me, that are healthy for me, that see me grow, and I kind of keep the other people at distance. I don't believe in we all need to get along, because I'm just like, I'm not going to bend to get along with
Right.
somebody who doesn't think that I should have rights. That's absolutely
Come
not.
on now.
So I'm thankful for the community, that I've been able to create, and hopefully other people are doing that too, during all of this right now.
Yes, that's something. But what I love about your backstory, before you got to be White House Social Secretary, there's so much that happened before
Thank you
that.
so much.
So, yeah, so you grew up in a couple of places. Philly girl, you are a Philly
Mhm,
girl, and then spent
mhm.
some time in Ohio as well. So just give us a little bit of your background, because in reading the book, I
Yeah.
found that it's so amazing, just the things that you had the opportunity to experience, and maybe sometimes some of the challenges as well coming up.
Yeah, of course. And so I went to boarding school when I was young. And so I was in boarding school from like 9 to 17 years old. It was a private boarding school in Hershey, Pennsylvania, for kids basically from poor backgrounds, or a parent had passed away, or some kind of traumatic thing has happened. And then I went off to college to Cincinnati, and I didn't want to go to college. I think it was one of these, you have to go.
Mm.
But that was definitely proven by me not making it past the first semester. But I was very involved in the community, HIV/AIDS work, a lot of trans rights stuff back before it was like a thing to do. A lot of protests around just equal treatment of people. And so I did that for a while, and then decided to go back to school. Went back to school when I was probably like 28, 29. And this was after I had also had a hip hop career as a hip hop journalist. And so
Yes,
I
I
was
love
doing
it.
that. I was working at a real estate firm. I was working at a hotel. I was working at, the mall. So I had a million jobs. Finally got accepted to school. The only school that would accept me was Community College of Philadelphia. And then in the first year of me going part time is when Barack Obama ran for presidency. He won. And then I applied to be a White House intern within his first year and got it. And then that kind of set me off to the path from there to become social secretary. And then I also graduated college while I was still there. So I kept going to school.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like the trajectory leading up to all of that. But I've had 9 lives and lived a million places. but it's fine for me because I don't thrive on I'm not good with just like there's only one way to do things and we have to do it this way.
Absolutely not.
My brain just thinks a little bit differently. Not saying that way is wrong either, but my brain just thinks a little bit differently of thinking, how much can I do? How much can I fulfill in my life? I'll figure out the money situation later. So that's how I've always operated, even in the hard times. So, yeah.
Yes. And I love that. That was a very short synopsis, which
That's
of course
very
you got to
short,
read the
yes.
book to get all of it. But Deesha, one of the things that really stood out to me is that number one, you are that person who was doing a bunch of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found myself in that space. I'm sure a lot of people find themselves in that space, really trying to kind of find your own way and figuring what that looks like. But what I love about it is like, yes, you were working and all of that, but you also had a commitment to the community. So where do you think that piece, because that's something that continues, that's like a thread throughout your life.
Mm-hmm.
What was it at such a young age that you feel led you to want to be like a community organizer, a community citizen, someone who
Well, the interesting thing is I never knew that was a thing. I mean, I think that now we give labels to everything, whether you're a community organizer, an activist, social impact strategist, all these things. But those things didn't exist back in the day. So it wasn't like I'm going to do this with the hopes of being a community organizer or a community leader. It was simply because I saw a need. I filled the need. I enjoyed filling the need, so it was very simple. It was very like, oh my goodness, these people don't have food. Like, why don't they have food? And how can we help them? And okay, I can just do a can drive or something. I think that I've never looked at impact or community work like we do now, where it has to be so grand. Like, if you can't, give $1 million, then you shouldn't give it all. Like, I'll take the $1,000. Like, I'll take what you can give or where you could start. Or if you can just say, Thanksgiving, our whole family is going to give, 10 cans each that's still something. And I think that I operated from a very grassroots community. I grew up in the grassroots community vibe of like the 90s, and it wasn't, we didn't have this whole, like, you got to scale up and you got to do this. It was like, oh my God, we have to fill the need right now. And while we're filling the need right now, we can think of a strategy to fill it long term. But people that are hungry can't wait for a strategy. And so I think that for me, I just always followed that. Like, I've always followed that I enjoy doing that. Like, I enjoy doing things that kind of, can fill the need for other people. In the process of doing that, I've gotten a little bit left behind in the way that things are done now. Like, they're just so meticulous. And I'm just like, I appreciate that. But at the same time, I think that we've got to get back to the way we used to organize in the 90s. And I'm not trying to sound old, like, oh, we can't do new things. No, we definitely can. But I miss that, like, hey, there's just a need, let's fill it. Like, we don't have to have 25 meetings. We don't have to have, a social media strategy. We don't have to have, like, take some pictures and put them up on the internet. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just, and so I think that I'm learning how to also, live in the impact world that we're in right now, but also remembering the core of what I learned in the 90s.
I love that, because we do need to be more hands-on and get out there and help people and support people and look for solutions. And as you said, we start with what we can do in the here and now, and you see an immediate need, and then you can strategize for what's going to happen later, or what needs to happen
100%.
later on down the line.
100%. And I think there's different ways to do it. I mean, I'm not the end all be all. I'm not saying that what I'm saying is right. I'm just saying that what I know works, and sometimes I think to myself, like, all these people are gathering at a party and they're just like, we're a party to help the homeless. And you're just like, what? Like, it to me, like my brain, it doesn't compute of like, well, is money going there, or is like it's sometimes I have a hard time conceptualizing that, like, the impact is turned into like red carpets and billboards and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to do my work of trying to be like, well, what does it look like now? Because I don't know that. I don't know that. I know how we used to feed people straight up and
Right.
not do a big, gala. And it was just like, which is fine. I attend those, but it's just different style for me.
Right, because I mean, well, we could have a whole long conversation about that, but I'm just thinking from the
And
perspective of the thousands and thousands of dollars that go into things like that. Like, couldn't we like scale it back and like be able to actually put that where the need is? So yeah,
yeah,
I get it.
yeah,
I definitely
exactly,
get it.
exactly,
Definitely get
exactly.
that. But to get to the White House, number one, you've already said that you've gone to school
Mhm.
and or were looking to go to school, had started school at a later age because that was just something that you wanted to do or felt like you needed to do at that time. And that's a thing in and of itself, because some people, once it doesn't, maybe if it doesn't happen at 17, 18, 19, they may not even go back
Mhm.
and do that. But in the book, you talk about that journey of figuring out where you were going to go to school, what even prompted you to want to go to school, because of course you're a child of the 80s and
Mhm.
watching Different World, and just seeing all these things and wanting to be a part of that. But even though it didn't happen for you in that way, I really love the confidence that
Mhm.
you had in yourself to even apply for that
Mhm.
first job at the White House, which was as an intern. So just share a little bit about that, because I
Yeah.
found it powerful.
Yeah, and I think, when I was in high school and kind of just saying, you have to go to college. One thing is that, like, any aspect of community work, like social work, that wasn't presented as an option. It was very much like, teacher, psychologist. Like, I didn't even know what social work was. So when I found out about social work in my 20s, after doing all this community work, that's when I was like, oh, now I know what I want to go to school for. So it led
Mhm.
me to that, which then led to the White House. And I think that, like, I didn't really have, it's interesting because I get this question all of the time. And I'm like, I didn't have no confidence. Like, I didn't have any confidence. What I had was, I had like the intellect to put really great essays together. And I
Okay.
knew that because I was a hip hop journalist. And
Mhm.
so when I looked at the application, it was like resume, fill out a form, 2 essays. I was like, well, I have confidence in my ability to write a good
Right.
essay.
Okay. Okay.
So I was just like, oh, at least I can do that. Like, I know that I'm good at writing. And so that was where my confidence was. It was definitely not in applying. It was like, well, the strongest part of this I know I could do. I don't think I'll
Mhm.
get this, but I know I
Mhm.
can do that. And so that's for me, because I've been a writer I've been, like, just writing on my own and since I was in middle school, and being a journalist. And so I knew that I could do that, and I knew I could really sell the community element, because that's who I was. And so I
Right.
think that the important thing for me was with applying was that I didn't try to put on the front like I was somebody else. I
Mhm.
didn't say, hey, I'm the smartest kid in the room. I didn't say, hey, this is about national security or economic policy or international trade or terror. I was like, I don't know nothing about none of that. What I
Right.
know is hip hop and community. And so I
Mhm.
think that I was planted in those spaces that I love, that I felt so myself, that were so natural to me, that's what I wrote about in my essay. And that's what then got me the internship. And so I think it was a matter of skill and a
Mhm.
matter of just knowing, what you're good at and going forward, not pretending that you're somebody else, not pretending that you're going to write some. Because what if I would have wrote this essay about national security and they would have put me in the National Security Department? I'd have been
Right.
like, I have
Um,
zero idea. Like, I don't, do I have a security clearance? What does that mean? Like, I would be so lost. And then I
right.
would feel like an imposter. I would feel like a fake. I would feel stupid because everybody else would know what they, and so I was like, No. And so yeah, so I think it was confidence in my ability to do a good application versus confidence in my ability to actually get the internship.
Right. I love that because there is a
Mhm.
difference.
Yeah.
Having confidence in your ability. One of
Yeah.
the things that often that you talk about a lot in Undiplomatic is really the desire to show up as your authentic self as much as
Mhm.
possible. Even though
Yeah.
there's this whole thing of imposter syndrome kind of back in the back of your head, you still,
Mhm.
throughout the stories that you tell in the book, you really are showing up as Deesha. So like
Mhm.
wearing the big earrings like you got on now, or whatever the
Mhm.
case may be,
They're
wearing
my
your braids.
undiplomatic earrings. They say undiplomatic on them.
All right, okay. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Or wearing your, poetic justice braids when you
Mhm.
when you walk into the room. And I just love that. Because there's so many times that we feel like we can't do that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that we have to, the hair has to be straightened, or we have to, wear the little pearls and, up to here. And of course, there are times where that's necessary
A
just
hundred
based on
percent.
protocol. But from just on a day-to-day basis, it was real important that you showed up like yourself. And I loved reading that. And I think that's inspirational for all of us, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, and thank you for saying that because I did have my hair straightened when I was there. I had a relaxer when I was there, which is fine because I feel like, we're Black women. You feel however you feel comfortable in your hair. Like it's not always to conform. Sometimes it's easier, to be honest. Like it's a lot of work. So if I'm like, if I have a
But I
relaxer, I can
got
just
braids.
relax it and then wake up in the morning, you got your
Mhm.
braids. Like that's what I'm saying. Like it'd be a lot of work. So anyway, um, but what I'll say about that, and I'll be very honest with you about this, is that we play up the authenticity part and say how amazing it is and how great it is. And it really is. It feels good, but it's something that feels good later. So, like,
Mhm.
I feel good now that I like really like people, now that we're 8 years removed, people are like, oh, you were so yourself. And you gave, you were a great example for me when I was a young staffer or whatever. But at the time, it was really isolating because
Mhm.
I didn't know how. I didn't know how. I think to try to either blend in or try to make my personality more likable or anything else more likable. And so, because of that, you become distant from the group thing, or you become distant. Like you start to people say you have an attitude, or you're not a team player, or you're uncooperative, or all these things when you're not those things, but you just don't like join the happy hour sometimes, or you call out things in meetings. And because of that, you get a reputation of you're difficult, you're hard, all these things. And so I think that one of the things I'd like to tell people and just be honest about is how isolating it is when you go to be yourself. And I think that's why a lot of people can't. I don't think it's because they don't know how. I think it's because it's really hard, and you have to be not liked, you have to be talked about, you have to just stand firm in that. And I think that if I didn't work at the place I would have been for the people that I would have worked for, I would have completely crumbled. I mean, I would have crumbled. Like I just would feel because you feel so odd and you feel so like so different and not in the way that like you know we look at different now is so wonderful and so great, but we didn't look at it like that then. It was like, ooh, here she come. Oh, like
Yeah.
and like it's that's the truth. And so I think that you have to start loving yourself, so then when you are your only company at the time, that's okay with you. And then the gratification comes years later when everybody's like, Deesha, you were so like, we love the way you move and you're always, and I'm like, why couldn't you say this then? Because I needed it then. Like I needed it then. I needed to
Mhm.
be affirmed then. And I appreciate you now, but it's like, yo, you left me on an island, like just looking
Yeah.
like I was crazy out in these streets.
Yeah,
So
I definitely understand that because as you were talking about that, I was thinking of I was that person when I worked in corporate America that
mhm.
didn't want to go to all the happy hours and stuff like that because I don't want to sit around like all that fake
Yeah,
stuff
and
you
it's and
kind of
it's
have to
nothing
put
against
on.
nobody else. It's just a lot
Right,
sometimes. Like it don't mean I don't like you. It's a lot. Like I need a
it's a
second.
lot.
I'm
It's a
overstimulated.
lot. And especially when you're dealing with, you already talked about it. We know aggressions, microaggressions, being
Mhm,
second guessed, all these different things all day. So when
mhm,
it comes to happy hour afterward, you're like, I just want to go home. I want to, I want to take this mask off, so to speak, and just be who I am. I don't want to have to spend the rest of the day with you all
Yeah.
pretending,
Yeah, and you don't think about too the physical implications of all that. Like if you are, obviously a Black woman, so I can speak to that best, but I'm sure other groups have their own version of this. But when you are masking or you're pretending or other things, like that is effort and energy. It's not like easy. It's like you literally have to like psych yourself up like you in the like final four. You know what I mean? Like every single day. So it's like an athlete, like that we're watching on TV now with the final four. It's just like you see them getting all hyped, getting ready, practicing all that. Like that's all the time. You know what I mean? And eventually you're going to get tired. So if these teams had a final four, every day, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, their body's going to break down. Their mental's going to break down. Like you can't keep that up. And so that is basically what it's like, being a Black woman in a workspace. Sometimes it's just like, okay, I got to gear myself up. And then by the time you're done, you don't have time, energy for nothing else. That means work becomes your identity because everything goes into that. And so I've done a lot of conditioning and unlearning to get out of that. But it's still really hard because it's hard to tell young people this because they want to be part of their group. They want to be seen. They want to get promotions. They want to do all these things. And it's a likability factor versus a performance factor. And we just don't want to admit that.
Yeah, girl, we can have a conversation outside of here about that. I know about that. I've been in situations where it definitely was a likability thing just because I didn't necessarily conform. So I could definitely relate to those things that you're talking about when you don't always want to conform, and feel good about it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because as you said, these things will take a toll on you. You carrying the weight of something that isn't real.
It really will. And I think that's my whole message of Undiplomatic. It was never, I can't give anybody a cure. And which is like, everyone's like, you give steps to how, and I'm like, I can give you what worked for me, but you have to find what works for you. And but the book is supposed to be like holding your hand through that process and not making you feel alone. Before we had the internet, you know what I mean? Like we would all be in our own silos. Like both of you and I are old enough to realize like, and you'd be like, is it me? Like, you really be like, am I the problem? Am I the one? And then we get the internet and find out, oh, it's Black women all over. Like it's all over. So then you're like, you don't feel better, but you feel in comfort at least that it's not you. Like you're not the problem. And I think that the issue now when I come in is that people think it's still them. Like, well, I don't have enough degrees. My hair is in braids. I'm wearing this lipstick. Like, child, it ain't got nothing to do with that. Like, you're just a Black woman. and it's just call it what it is, And so the internet's been good at, helping me find community to be like, oh, it's not me. Like, I'm all right. It's the rest of y'all.
Yeah, somebody else is on something crazy.
Yeah.
But looking, just at your trajectory, getting in as an intern and then ultimately, there's some things that happen. Y'all got to read the book to find out what happens, that whole process. But ultimately, once you are back at the White House and you are like really having opportunities to move up and move ahead, I really enjoy that as well, Deesha, reading about that, because it's the thing of you don't always necessarily have to have a certain degree or a certain whatever it is that people think. If you get in there and you do the work and, there are sometimes people are going to see things about you that you don't recognize about yourself, number one, but that there is room to grow and improve, or move ahead, I should say, in a career. If there are people who see the value in you and allow you those opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a place in a space for a traditional education, and people want to go that route, and they completely and totally should. I think that for me it was all the things that I thought, I won't say were silly, but we weren't seeing people that didn't have a college degree be successful in the White House on that level. We weren't seeing people who, were hip hop reporters being able to take those skills to the White House. And so back then I thought it was just these silly ideas or these silly things that I did that were just oh, you love the community, you love writing about hip hop. And then what got me to the White House were those silly things, you know. And not only that, but I went as an intern who had been in the world for a while. So I was 31 when I was an intern. So I'd had a job as a secretary for like 8 years at that point. I was a peer counselor. I was a writer. So I had experiences that some of the 19 and 21-year-olds didn't have. And it was okay because they weren't supposed to have them yet because they were younger, right? And so I think that that was also like very attractive to be like, oh, this person knows how to do this or she can do this. I went in already with that attitude of like, I'd never been here before, but I know how to do this and this, that, and the third. And so I think that once I got hired back there, it was a pure curiosity of wanting to see what else I could do. You know, I mean, I wanted to travel. You know, I always wanted to travel and couldn't afford it. And then I was in the department that did the travel. So it was like, well, there's a job open as the hotel liaison where you could do all the president and first lady's hotels. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what a dream. That was my dream. It still is my dream job. Like, even though I got moved up twice, still was my favorite job. And I got to travel all over the world, like doing their logistics, making the hotel the White House for them, you know? And it was just like, oh my God, you know, I mean, all in these different continents and things I didn't think were possible, you know? And that wasn't because I had a degree, it's because I had a love and a curiosity and for what I wanted, you know, for doing it. And I think that we downplay curiosity, but I think it's a good lot. It's a good guide for us.
I agree because I'm one of those people like you. I've done a lot of different things, had a lot of different jobs, and sometimes I've gotten jobs and maybe I didn't have the experience in that, but I like to learn. And I'm also one that even in the next thing that I move to, I take things that I learned along the way. And I think that that's so important because even nowadays, some resumes aren't necessarily chronological. It's more so, what are the skills that you know? And being able to take skills that you learn either through life or through education or whatever the case may be, and then use those skill sets in a different way. And then continue to still learn and grow because lifelong learning is a thing.
And it's 100% a thing. Yeah. And I think that we're naturally bred to be competitive. So like it's either you or me. And that's of course true with jobs and stuff. But in the scheme of things, there's space for the person who has a master's, a doctorate and everything else. And the person who didn't go to school and has all this life experience. Like I think people see it as one or the other instead of saying if we both work together, like think of what we can accomplish bringing those individual things to the table at a workplace. And that's just we're still in the phase of like you have to have this over here and this over here, you know. And a lot of it is because people are like, you know, Deesha got far at the White House, you know, without having all of this, but I have all this and I didn't, you know. So I met that too, and it was just like, hey, like what do you want me to do about that? Like, you know, you're like, I don't know what to do about that. So yeah.
Right. And it's one of those things that like some people will say, what God has for you is for you. So, I mean,
that's for you. I've seen plenty of things where I'm like, I wish that was me. I wish I could do that. So we all have it. But like at the end of the day, I've had a really great life. I have a really great life. And so I've got to lean into what God has given me and what's still to come. It's not over. So I'm like, who knows? Like I could achieve whatever I'm seeing on somebody else. That could happen to me in 5 years. Who knows? You know? So, you know, yeah.
Exactly. So again, everybody, I keep talking about read the book because if you haven't, there's a lot you're going to learn about Deesha and even what it is to like work in a White House at that that level. So that is something. One of the things that you said that stood out to me is that people automatically think that if you work for the government or the White House that you're making tons and tons of money, but that's not. You're like no.
No.
It's government, it's public service and things like that. But I know that those experiences are valuable, nevertheless.
Yeah. I mean, it's all relative, right? Like somebody can look at my salary and be like, that's a lot. You know, she's making a lot. And I understand how they could say that because if I were looking at a salary of a government employee when I worked at the mall or a real estate, you know, secretary, I'd be like, damn, that's a lot of money. But then you start to look at the value that you bring to the table, plus how many hours you're working, plus how much it costs to live in the city you live in, plus the taxes, plus the medical. So all of that dwindles. And for what I was doing at the White House, like on the outside, people are getting paid twice as much, right? And so it wasn't a lot of money, like, but I can understand how people look at it and think it's a lot of money because they think if I had that amount of money, I'd be doing so much better or I'd be whatever. But it's factors individually of all of our perspectives. There are definitely people in government who make a lot of money. I wouldn't want them. 1 minute. But also when you come from like a poverty mindset or a poverty scarcity, you don't even know how to manage money when you get it. Like, so it was all just like, what is this? Like, what is happening, and what's savings, and what's putting money in the stocks, and what's 401k. Like, those are all basic things that I learned by design. It wasn't like I knew what this stuff meant. And so, my financial education wasn't there, but yeah, wasn't a lot of money.
Yeah, but again, well, valuable experience that has led you to be able to do a whole bunch of other things outside of that. So of course you were pretty much there for the entirety of the Obama administration in one capacity or another. So, once you finally had a chance in those last couple of years to serve as the social secretary, you had an opportunity to do a lot of wonderful things and bring some of that music in and plan some of the parties and all these sorts of things that look glamorous from the outside, but it's
they were glamorous from the inside too. They're very glamorous.
So I found that pretty interesting as well, just to see how hard people don't think. But I think of like if you're planning a wedding every day.
Yeah,
that level. It's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. And and there's so many factors at it. And I have to, of course, give a shout out to the first African-American social secretary, Desiree Rogers. She was the social for the Obama when they went to the White House. And, she also very much had hip hop and poetry and so many things at the White House. She kind of laid the blueprint, I think, for the rest of the administration and how social events went. But I think it's really, honestly, the stakes are so high. The stakes are high. Like, if you make a mistake, it can end up on the front of the paper, or, you can end up with an international incident. If you just do a wedding and something goes wrong, it sucks, but everybody will be all right. At the White House, it's like, there's not really room for error. And when there's not room for error, when you have imposter syndrome, it's a little messy. It's a little messy, a messy world there. So yeah,
it's a little messy world, but yes, I didn't tell you this. I was in the Air Force, so I know all about protocols and things have to be a certain way and look a certain, all those sorts of things. So
and thank you for your service as well.
Thank you. But yeah, doing that on 10 every day.
Yes.
That's a lot. I can only imagine. And I just said wedding because there's so many different pieces and
100%. It's a perfect comparison. It's perfect.
Every day there's every day I got a bridezilla.
I couldn't imagine. Like, honestly, it's just, thankfully for us, we had the same venue. So we had the same venue with a chef and a florist and a curator and an usher. So we were very I was very blessed that I had that team was there that was institutional knowledge because they worked through different presidents. So it was a great chance for me to be like, whew, like, what did y'all do last time you had a pope, or what does the state dinner look like? And so that institutional knowledge was key to success, my success there.
Yes. And you do talk about the people that work there. And I found that just beautiful that you would even mention that, because of the fact that a lot of times people do look at, like whatever the high profile position is or the one that's front facing, not realizing that there are people behind the scenes that are doing work as well. And, I know you have your guide, like one of the things that you learned is to reward, lift up, and thank those with thankless jobs. The nurses, teachers, frontline workers, social workers, janitors, farmers, all of that. That's one of your lessons that you learned at the White House by those people that were there to support your work.
Yeah, because there were times where I didn't. I think I've always been a person who, affirmed community and people in different level jobs. But I think that once I got to the White House and once I became social secretary, there was a whole, just like a tornado of, again, imposter syndrome, power, high stakes, stress, aggression. There was so much in my head that I think that I probably got away from some of those core values that were mine at some point. And there was a lot of like, I'm in charge, like thank you for helping, but like I know how to do this best. And I think that it was a is a matter of me exuding my confidence through power. And didn't last long. But
Mm-hmm.
I definitely remember incidents where I would do that. And I admit that for my own accountability because I want to stand in my accountability and stand firm in that. And so I started volunteering when I became social secretary, like a couple months after, because I realized I had gotten out of touch with community so much
Mm-hmm.
that I needed to go back because I was like, something doesn't feel right, And so that's why I volunteered almost the whole time I was at the White House, but then I took a break and then went back to it.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of time out of the White House, you have been doing just so many, besides putting this book, I'm going to show y'all the cover again. Besides putting this book out into the world last year, there's just so much that has happened in the last, was it 7-8 years now since then?
Mhm.
And so, of course, dealing with seeing what's happening in the world around you and how it
Mhm.
may be impacting people that you knew that worked in some of those jobs. But how has that been for you? Just to watch that
Um,
or talk to people who are still kind of in the mix of it.
well, the good thing is people are still in the mix of it. Like they are lock key. Like they're just like not. They're doing their jobs, staying under the radar, doing what they always do. They have a discretion and a privacy that I envy. I mean, there are many things that are not in the book. I kept it very,
Right.
surface level. But I think that for me, watching what's going on is hard because at this point, I'm 7 years out of the White House. And so is it 7 or 8? 8. I'm 8 years out of the White House. And it feels like I'm getting back to myself before the White House. And that
Mm,
person was such a community activist and community leader that it's hard for me to react in a political manner sometimes or react to politics because it was never like, it was a secondary thing to me that was like, I went to the White House because of my community background and from what I love to do. So I was never like, look at these policies and laws. I'm the same person that applied for the internship. I
gotcha.
don't understand what half of this stuff means, but I think that I have a deeper knowledge on at least understanding parts enough to know how it will affect the community. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's the difference with me is like now, yes, I may not understand fully like tariffs and this, that, and the third, but I do understand the implications for the community. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is what I understood before I even went to the White House. So I can connect now the language that I've had and learned with the person that I was and the activism and figure out how can I relieve the need for
Mm-hmm.
somebody who can't afford something anymore or the food bank that's going to get all of their funding cut or the farmers, like how can I now put those two worlds together, which is then where my business comes in. But I
Yeah.
think but it's interesting because I don't it's interesting having a place where I'm not a nonprofit leader and I'm no longer working in politics. So I have this middle ground of being like, I'm kind of like a free agent of trying to figure out like, where I can best fit and react to it. But I think that it's just it's sad all around because again, my emphasis and focus is on the community, and I think that we have not even begun to scratch the surface of how everyday people will be affected. And that's hard for me. So I'm trying to do my best to put in things now, strategies and quick campaigns, initiatives to make
Mm-hmm.
the landing a little bit softer than what it's going to be.
Yes. And to think, yeah, it's only 3 months at the time of this recording. So, ooh, child. That's all I can say about that. But Hook and Fasten is
Mhm.
your social impact agency.
Mhm.
So I love that. Hook and Fasten, where did that name come from?
My husband, child. So he's like the brainchild behind all the names of everything I've almost ever done.
Okay.
But I was like, I needed something with the company, and I love sewing. I mean, it was. I wish there was a better story behind this. There is not.
Okay.
We were going through sewing terms, and I knew I wanted something and something, and it was like Dyer end, but then there's a so that's where it came from. And we basically, hook companies to social good, and then fasten them to communities to execute and curate. Is kind of what we like to say.
Okay, I love that. I love that. And so
Mm-hmm.
through that, you are looking at systems and putting things in place to help
Mm-hmm.
others learn how to help others.
Yeah, we basically like work with community with companies and say you
Mhm.
have products, you have resources, you have time, you have skills. What can we use to basically help a community organization do what they need to do for the people? And so it is very much like, we understand that you can't do everything. And it's not even getting in the political spectrum. Like, that this food bank has lost $500,000 and that's going to
Mhm.
affect how they give food. So you as a company, what can you do? Is it something where you could say, oh, we have product, we make, flour. I don't know. Like, can we donate flour? Can we, donate a kit to make pancakes? I don't know. Or can we say we have resources where we can help them, like make signs, or we can help our marketing department can help. Do we have funds, or we can just give some money to them? We have time, or we can send some people from the company to go volunteer there to clean up or do communications. And so we help build that bridge between the two. So the partnership is authentic. And then also you're meeting a need while also trying to strategize to like get a long-term thing in play. And we service the bridge between that. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that because it's kind of like, yes, you can get what's the old saying, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, teach him how to
Mhm.
fish, he'll eat forever, he'll live forever. That's kind
Right.
of that concept.
Right. Yeah. And while somebody's eating the fish, we're teaching them how to fish as well. So it's like you can do two things at one time. But we have to, like,
Right.
again, going back to the earlier point of we have to answer the now. Like we can't wait until the next election to be like, we can solve the hunger crisis. It's like, well, so somebody needs dinner tonight. So you know what I mean? Like what do we do? And so
What do we
that's
do?
that's where we come in.
Wow. So you've been doing the work with Hook and Fasten. You've also bgirl.world global scholars. What's that all about?
Yeah, so B Girl was an organization. We just shut it down actually.
Oh,
It was
okay.
an organization we started a decade ago to diversify study abroad, personal and professional travel, and foreign service, really with Black girls. And so we would take Black girls in ninth and 10th grade in Philadelphia, and we would do a 2-year global education program, everything from culinary to dancing to language to domestic trips to everything on that spectrum. We would get them passports and sometimes their parents' passports, and then we would end with a trip to a different country where they would learn just like different customs and kind of be able to be part of the culture somewhere else. And so that was Be Girl World. We ran it for 10 years, and we just stopped it. Yeah, recently.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well,
Mhm.
that sounds great. But you're
Yeah.
doing so much that would be probably a lot to try to manage all of that and still.
Yeah, I mean, like also like there's a need for so much that like when you would try to get funding dollars for travel, global education and travel against like hunger and housing, it would just
Mm,
be like begging for money. And I think that we also got that became a little tiring of us trying to keep it up with our own funds. And
right.
so yeah. Yeah.
And that makes definitely makes sense, Deesha.
Mhm.
Now, I already mentioned that you are doing some training with the whole concept imposter to impact.
Mhm.
And you've been working with the Harvard Kennedy School on that. So
Mhm.
what's that all about?
Yeah, so I was a fellow, Harvard Kennedy School Institute of Politics. I was a resident fellow in 2019, and the course was called Imposter to Impact, and it basically was saying how we think that what we have naturally, who we are naturally, is silly, or it's not of use, or it's something that isn't worthy, but actually those are what we use to have impact with ourselves and with our community. And so it was like I think it was a 7 or 8 week course, which I taught using my story to break down number one, imposter syndrome, number two, like overcoming and managing it, and how at the end of the day that you use that for the impact in your community, just like I did. And I think that when I reframed it in a way to say, oh wait, no, like all the things you think that you are not good at, or you are silly, whatever it is, like those are what you can use to change the world. And I realized that like I had a huge impact on so many people, so many things by being myself and bringing to the table, the skills that I knew what to do. And so imposter to impact breaks it down in that way where you're able to look back at yourself and also dig up the root of why you feel like an imposter. It doesn't just happen with a promotion or a job. There is a root there. And for me, the root was planted when I was young. And it was like, you're a Black girl who's like too loud, who's always asking questions, who's defying all these things. And me hearing back those comments about myself and thinking I was faulty or thinking that something was wrong with me, that planted that root. And then that tree just grew as I grew. And so in order to get rid of that, I had to go back and dig up that root before I moved on. And once I realized that imposter syndrome was not my fault, it was nothing that I did. It was nothing that I did not do. That took such a weight off of me to be able to walk forward and healing that. And so that's what the course is really about.
I love that as well. So you're doing that good work out there in the world, Miss Deesha.
Listen, I'm doing the good work, but listen, I need to also, figure out some streams of income. It's like this good work is lovely, but then you're also just like, I'm doing a lot of good work, but that doesn't translate into the money. So I'm working on that now.
What I say, I overstand. I understand. I definitely do. But I know in the book you also talk about, and you mentioned it just a teeny bit about the taking care of yourself. And how a lot of these things, whether it is working like really, really hard and trying to do a good job at whatever it is, or, supporting others, or even honestly, sometimes it's community work that we do where it's a lot of service to others. Sometimes there is a deficit in what we're doing for ourselves. So how are you looking at or thinking of your own self-care and personal self-preservation more now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of it was I was forced to because I got type 2 diabetes. And so I think that, having a chronic illness, it really forces you to look at your life in general because, unfortunately, we are a society that says you have type 2 diabetes because you don't eat right and you don't exercise, right? No one talks about the mental part of always having to perform or being stressed out or overextending yourself or not taking care of yourself mentally. And so I think that for me, it's no longer an option. It's a priority to be able to say no to things, to opportunities, but also to let people just think what they think about me. If I say no to something or I can't help you because I need to take care of myself and you think, she's selfish or she's whatever, then that's really on you because my body of work says otherwise. So if one time I say no, or one time I say I'm taking a step back or I need some time, and anybody takes that offensively, then I'm just like, well, you know what? My body of work for 40 something years says otherwise. And so if that's what you're judging me on or whatever, then that's okay. But I think the other part of that is it's not selfish for us to want to take care of ourselves. It's not selfish for us to say, I want to live. I want to be here for the long term. I want to see my nieces and nephews graduate college. If I continue the route I'm going, I'm going to have diabetic coma eventually. You know what I mean? Like I can't do that. And so it's no longer a situation where we're just talking about it for me. It's an action to say I'm taking care of myself. And that looks like different for everybody. For some people, that is going away for a couple of days. For some people, it's just turning their phone off. For some people, it's taking the social media apps off. For some people, it's going to the spot, whatever it is that you could do within your budget that you like to do, that, feel free. But I will say that we need to be careful when it comes to community work and volunteering, because that also can be another addiction and substitution for what you're not fixing in your own life. But because it is such a good works, it's good works, it's good work. I'm helping people. It's good works. We don't look at it as harmful, but it can be when you go ahead and you serve other people. You do all this all the time in neglect of yourself. And so I had to realize that I had a little bit of an addiction here, that I was like feeling at home with like going to the shelter all the time and all that. Like I felt so validated. And then it was just like, I need to slow down because at some point that's not enough. And I keep doing it. And so I had to take a step back. But I have no problem now just taking time off. Like my husband and I just go for long drives or do whatever. Yeah.
That is so good. And, as you said that, I'm like, wow, it's true because, I will
Yeah.
admit, I'm a person,
Yeah.
I have a day job.
Yes.
I do Brown Girl Collective.
Mm-hmm.
I have a role in my sorority.
Mm-hmm.
I still
It's a lot.
volunteer. It's a
It's a
lot.
lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah.
I see
Yeah.
you what came up in my face like,
It's a
girl,
lot.
it's a lot. It is.
And you just have to take a step back because eventually, and I'm not saying this for everybody, everybody is different, but
Mhm.
eventually you can't keep that up.
Right.
Like eventually it's like you, and for me, I started to get bitter. I was like, I can't, why is nobody helping me? Or like, I can't do all of this. I can't, and I still have setbacks. Like for instance, like, I told everybody I'm not organizing dinners and stuff this year. I'm not doing, except my birthday. Not, but then I'm organizing dinner next week, and everybody's texting me like, "Where are we going? What are we doing?" That place we went to last time was too loud, and now I'm mad. So now I'm like, "Well, why did y'all do it?" But then why did I even step forward and do it in the first place? You know what I'm saying? That's on me. That's a relapse. You know what I mean? But I think that like it never for me ends up in like I'm happy with everything. It's just like I'm mad. I'm mad that I gotta do this. I'm mad I gotta spend money. I gotta ask for money. And it's just like if I slow down and I only pick a few things, I can enjoy them. Versus being overwhelmed, right? So yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is a thing. Definitely figuring out, I think some people say there's no such thing as balance, but a level of, figuring out, okay, I can do this, but I can't do that. And I do take breaks and all of that. But yeah, it's just some weeks it's just like, oh child.
It could be a lot. And I think that part of it for me, part of it for me is like, I want to give people the choice to do what they want to do, however they want to do it. And I'm not saying this is everybody. I'm just saying the majority of us. So there's some people that be like, that's not me. I want it. Well, good. Then that's good for you. As I put in the book, some may not be for you, and that's good for you. But most people are going through this. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Taking breaks, like you just said, and in the book you talk about getting help. That's another thing that you mentioned in the book. So everybody, please, we're actually at time. So, I know you got stuff to do. You are a busy woman. So everybody, please.
Just today. Today is weird, but it's fine.
Grab a copy of Undiplomatic because it is good. You're going to learn a lot about Deesha's life, Deesha's story, things that, food for thought, what it looks like to work, behind the scenes at the White House, or at least in the Obama White House, because who knows what it's like now.
I cannot vouch.
Cannot vouch for other situations, but at least during that time frame. So yes, it's just good. And, one of the reasons why I have spaces like this is for us to hear, other Black women's stories, to learn, how they are learning to live well or overcome obstacles or, deal with imposter syndrome or, be of service to the community, all these different things. So Deesha, you are someone who had been on my list for a while in a good way.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for having me.
So it's a pleasure to have you here. And for anyone who's looking for the book, if you don't have it, one of your options is the Brown Girl Collective Bookstore, which is just what it is there, www.browngirlcollectivebookstore.com. It is attached to Bookshop, and you can go there and pick up a copy, or also look at your libraries. And I do know it's also available as an audio book as well. So there are a lot of different options for chiming into Deesha's story, and I hope that you will do that soon. So thank you so much, and that's it for now. We'll see you again real soon. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.